Hello, and welcome to this presentation. I am Caleb Castleman, and I will be showing you, my album. Essentially, my project is now called the Firm Foundation, and it was arranging, recording, mixing, and mastering. That's a lot of names. We'll get into that. My own album. So let's move on. Yes. So the original idea for my project was the album was to be called Home. It was going to be a 10-track album. It was going to be guitar based because that's what I play, and it was going to have like a warm kind of homely feel, um, almost like you're in a old, just one room church house with the congregation, and that's about all it is. So it's going to be popular gospel songs, and that was a really good idea until I realized that that's not the kind of music that I write whenever I sit down and play around. So now we have, as it stands, it's called The Firm Foundation, and it's still a 10-track album. I may only have two of those tracks done, but we'll also get to that. There's no specific instrumental base. We have a lot of different things represented. It's just popular hymns, not necessarily gospel songs, and it has a different feel for each hymn. So why do this as my project? So originally, when we were asked to do our projects last year, around this time, I thought it'd be really cool to do something with the car. And then I remembered that I am dead broke. So I thought, well, I can do something with music. I have music equipment. That'll work out. So recording my music, I always thought that'd be something that'd be really cool to do. So, well, where to start? So I thought, well, I could do secular, or I could do Christian, but as a devout Christian, a Lutheran myself, I thought it wouldn't be very much fun for me in the end if I did some secular music. Plus, I am pretty much paying nothing to do this right now, so I might as well. It's based out of the Lutheran Service Book, which both simplifies the songwriting process because I don't need to come up with my own ideas originally. I can have something down on paper that's already there, and I just need to work off of it, which is something that I've always kind of liked doing with music. I hear a song on the radio, and I think, you know what, that could use. I always have something extra to add. So, arranging rather than writing, and it maintains a firm theological base that way. I'm not going to come up with something that is not necessarily correct or couldn't be used as worship music. So out of this project, I learned a lot of things, but to enumerate them, I think it comes down mostly to planning and coordinating, recording, acoustic and electronic, the difference between those two, and sound design. So let's get into those. So planning and coordinating, the hard part, as most people say. So, it's kind of just the concept of putting things on paper, right? Planning and coordinating. Well, I made a Google Doc. So on each page, originally what I had, you can kind of see here, I have the title of the hymn, the number in the hymnal, the genre of the hymn, and originally I also had how many hymnals the hymn is in. I used hymnary.com a lot for this project. And then under that, I just kind of have the ideas of what I want it to sound like. So this is just concept ideas. And then after that, I came up with, well, in terms of planning and actually making things happen, because you got to go from the planning phase to the building phase, right? So to make that happen, I made some charts on each one to add, just kind of an incentive for myself to say, hey, this is the person that I'm going to use for that. This is what I'm doing. This is what I need for each track. Do I have that ready enough that they can actually record it? And do I have it done? I actually do have most of these done, but well, I didn't really want to put it in because I forgot, and I got it done without putting it in there. So, and it's just nice that it's really editable on a Google Doc. So then, in terms of communication, which is part of the coordination process, yeah, made some mistakes. So, a big mistake that I made was not using a calendar for my deadlines. So to communicate early to people was a big mistake that I made. I just kind of brushed it off, said, well, I'll talk to them whenever I'm done, whenever I'm ready. So suddenly that doesn't work so well. So not only, those are a deadly combo, getting the calendar and the early communication, because suddenly you can knock a bajillion things out and just get it done. So then actual recording mistakes, this both happened whenever I was recording with Rebecca. We were recording cello on this piece actually, And well, the first day we went to record, well, I had my microphone and my MacBook, but I didn't have the cable to connect the two, and that's kind of an important piece. You'll find out whenever you forget one. And you might see bold down there, hit save. Yeah, I haven't forgotten to do that since the second session when I did bring the microphone cable and I went home to edit and realized that none of the things that we recorded were saved. So that was a fun experience. And then we did recording part 3 and we recorded literally everything. Now it sounds great. So thanks to Rebecca for that. The next part, recording, the fun part. So I kind of touched on that, but a big reason why I wanted to do this now is because Concordia is literally packed full of amazing musicians. I mean, if you've ever seen a choir or band concert, you know that like they don't mess around. Like they're actually really good. That's a fantastic resource for someone as an arranger and who wants to record things, because at your fingertips you have the ability to record whatever you want. And that's just something that I'm probably not going to have most of my life. So it's nice to have it now and to take advantage of that while I can. So it says chamber choir is next because chamber choir is next. So I only have 2 of the songs actually prepared and ready to be listenable, but the chamber choir is going to be part of a few more hymns, A Mighty Fortress being one of them, The Church is One Foundation being another one. And the Concordia Chamber Choir is just really good at singing, so I think they can probably sight read it and be fine. And that's pretty amazing. Another thing about recording that I have found is that it doesn't require a professional setup. You might have noticed that there are 2 microphones on this slide. The one on the left is the one I used, except mine has a volume switch and that one doesn't seem to. And not a volume switch, an on and off switch. I apologize. Well, the SM58, which is the one on the left, that cost me about $85 at Sweetwater. I picked up a dent and scratch model, and it works just fine. The one on the right is an SM7B, and that is a standard like podcasting microphone, but it's also been used for vocals on like thousands of artists' tracks. It's pretty much a standard in a recording studio, whereas the SM58 would be kind of like pushed off as a live microphone. Well, turns out that if you put enough work into it, an SM58 will work just fine for recording literally everything. So everything that you hear in the tracks was recorded in GarageBand either on that SM58 microphone or it was synthesized. So we'll get to how I can do that later. And it's important when you're recording to have a clear plan laid out prior. What I found when recording cello with Rebecca is that, well, I went in and I didn't have anything down in the recording. And I thought, well, we have music. I have written music, right? So surely that music will be enough of a plan. No, because that music has dynamics, that music has retardandos, it has parts where it slows down past the normal tempo, and I don't have any way to express that to Rebecca other than just waving my arms in a rhythmic pattern. And I'm not good at that because I'm not a conductor. In terms of starting from scratch, that's really tough to do unless the artist themselves is the one that's going to put down that first track. So that was a mistake that I made, but I learned from it, so it was worth it. Next part is kind of that difference between acoustic and electronic. So I kind of touched on the fact that I have some synthesized instruments in the songs, and well, there's some differences, of course. So acoustic instruments are going to be the real deal. So I have guitar and cello and, well, obviously vocals. You don't really synthesize those. Acoustic is important, and sometimes it's necessary. It's you don't have another option, especially in vocals. You have to do acoustics, so you have to capture that in a microphone actually. Then you have to take that file from the microphone, put it in the recording process. Then you have to adjust everything minutely to make it sound the way you want it to. We'll get into that later as well. Otherwise, well, electronics, they sound fake and it's tough to simulate the real sounds. I have to play with those too. There are high-end recording softwares, like it says up there, or production software, as I put it in the slides, and they are going to fix that issue for you because they essentially are more expensive. Well, the more expensive stuff gets more fancy and better. So, of course, they sound more realistic. Whereas the GarageBand software that I use is free from Apple. So it works, but I have to do a little bit of tweaking and fine tuning to make it sound right. Um, Acoustic instruments, you have to deal with tuning, whereas electronic, they're going to be in tune whether you want them to be or not. It's going to be perfect from the start. And in music, that's not always a good thing. Often it's very good to have little flaws and mistakes. That's what makes it human. That's what makes music very personal. Tempo, um, in acoustic instruments, you have to nail the tempo the first time or you have to start over. There is a way to edit that, but it's not fun. Um, so if timing is a huge issue, then electronic might be the way to go because it's easily editable. Uh, in fact, if I opened the software up for you, I can show you. I can literally slide the notes back and forth as to how when they hit. So even in that retardando, the part where the song slows down, um, I can adjust the instrument to just match that perfectly. All I need to do is fine tune and tweak a little bit. Now, this is something that's very you know important to acoustic instruments that you're not going to get in electronic synthesizer instruments, and that's that dynamics are right there in front of you. If you hit a string harder, it's going to be louder. If you sing louder, it's going to be louder. Well, on an electronic instrument, you put it in, and there's some control, but it's not something that you can change on the fly. It's all going to come in at one straight exact dynamic. Nothing's going to be louder or softer than the other thing. So then I have to artificially create dynamic contrast, which sometimes sounds right and sometimes sounds very wrong. So acoustic is preferred overall, kind of all of those points. Acoustic is something that you want to go with, but sometimes it's nice to have electronics for, like, I have a B3 organ in one of my songs, and those are not only impossible to find, but also if you do find one, you're not going to be able to afford it. So in terms of getting that sound, well, it's a lot easier for me to just get it from the computer. And it gets pretty close, I think. So you get to hear that later. Moving on, we come to sound design. Now, this is where it gets complicated. So sorry if you got confused earlier, it's only getting worse. So the first part of this, I have three parts for this, is just creating sound. So essentially, there's three methods that I used. There's instrument to microphone. The microphone goes in, and that's those blue and purple tracks that you see down here in the bottom left corner. Those ones are all actually recorded in a microphone. I also have some suspended cymbal, some other things that are done in the other song that I'll show you, and those were done with an actual microphone. Well, the other option is MIDI software. So MIDI software, all it does is tell the computer where the note is, how loud it is, and what note it is. It doesn't tell it what instrument it is, it doesn't give it any actual sound, it just gives the computer information. But what I'm able to do in GarageBand, this is the score to Lord Jesus Think on Me. And there are a lot of different parts there. I don't want to put all of those into this computer individually. So what I can do is I can pick out a part and I can export a MIDI file. I can then drag that MIDI file directly into GarageBand and it will synthesize the instrument for me. And then I have to do some fine tweaking and tuning to make it sound realistic, but it's a start and it all is timed. It's all timed perfectly and it's playing on the right note. So that makes it very easy. I also have another thing that I use. This is what I use for the bass and for the organ in this song, is musical typing. So as you can see on the right, well, this has keyboard letters, and not the kind of keyboard that's on a piano, the kind of keyboard that's on a computer. And I can actually type the part. So as you can see, it's kind of laid out like a piano. Well, I play my computer like a piano, and magically I have a bass. So that was pretty cool to figure out. The next part is, well, toying with sound, mixing. So mixing is the process of making everything the volume you want it to be, essentially. So as you can see on the right here, there are a lot of different tracks, and each one of them is at a slightly different volume than the other one. But that creates the audio effect I want. As you see on the left, there's some fancy looking squiggly light yellow lines. Well, those yellow lines actually represent the volume that I have. So what this program is able to do, if I click right here, it pulls up the lines on these tracks, and I can adjust those so that whenever it hits that point in the song, the slider will adjust where I want it to be. So as you can see, this is actually the organ part from the other song in the last slide. And as you can see, it kind of goes up and down quite a bit there. Well, I wanted to have some dynamic peaks and things where it went up and down and got louder and softer. So I put in the information, and now my computer automatically set that up so that whenever it plays through that section, it gets louder and softer whenever I want it to. So that was pretty cool for mixing. And yes, like I said, it's mostly volume, but it also has to do with pan. Pan comes from panorama. Essentially, it's the amount of volume that's in each headphone, essentially, because stereo sound is cool. Well, I have this organ part. You can see this one's green and not yellow, actually. And that green represents the pan track. So that has it panned from left to right. And it goes all the way from hard left, stops in the middle, and then goes to the right. So that's something that I can adjust, and that's part of the mixing process. And this is all things that I just learned while doing this because I wanted it to sound that way. I came up with the idea and then figured out how to do it. So that was a really fun process. This was not a fun process, but it went the same way. Fine tuning sound mastering is definitely the hardest part, and it is adjusting specific frequencies. Essentially, I have some equalizers pulled up here in the pictures. This one is for vocals on Just As I Am, and this one is for guitar on Just As I Am. Now, as you can see, they both have what's called a high pass. So anything that's below this frequency right here will absolutely not come through. That's good for getting rid of some white noise. You can probably hear some small buzzing in the background of this video, and that would get rid of that. It also has a high pass filter, and I might have got this. No, this is a high pass. This is a low pass. Whew. This is an example of the low pass. This is what's on the guitar and is actually causing that curve. So essentially what this does is any like so buzzing and boomy sounds will go away when I put things down here. And on the high end of the equalizer, I can get rid of hissing sounds, especially. I can get rid of those by adding this filter. And those are just a handy combination to make things sound clear and crisp. Generally, if I was working in a recording studio, I would want to not have a low pass at all, because hopefully if you're working in a recording studio, you don't have any buzzing or hissing sounds happening in the background, and you want the instrument to be creating all of that noise on its own. Well, that's not necessarily the case in home recordings. So that's kind of why I have this set up in the fingerstyle guitar low pass, nicknamed home recording, is because it's set about right to get rid of most of the hissing noise in my house. And this is not necessarily the fun part, but it's necessary to making it go just the extra level up. Essentially, I can get rid of those noises and make it sound like it came from a professional studio. Well, now you know the secret's out. It didn't, but I could fool you. I could fool you if I didn't tell you. So what's the takeaway from all of this? I mean, I learned a lot of things, but what does it actually come down to? It comes down to making music is a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. And that's part of the reason why I have only 2 songs for you, is because I had a lot of fun arranging a lot of different songs, but going from literally some MIDI files or notes on paper to actual recorded music is a lot more work than I thought it was going to be, like 30 hours more work than I thought it was going to be. In fact, I have over 50 hours in this project, and I only have 2 songs. So yeah, making music is time consuming and difficult, but that's what makes it so rewarding and fulfilling. Especially, I think, to me, it just creates a feeling of kind of appreciation for music, as well as just a joy in my soul to hear my own recordings and know that they're good. So now, this is what I came up with for an album cover. It's just my home congregation, but I nicknamed it the Firm Foundation because, well, the church is our foundation of society. It keeps us together. And after the hymn, the church is one foundation, what I'm going to share with you now is the actual album itself. So sit back, relax, put on some good headphones, and enjoy.
which spot, O Lamb of God, I come, I come. Just as I am, Lord, tossed about with many a conflict, many a doubt, fightings and fears within, without. O Lamb of God, I come, I come. Just as I am, thou wilt receive, wilt welcome, pardon, cleanse, relief, because I promise, I believe. O Lamb of God, I come, I come.
That hymn was my rendition of Just As I Am. The next piece that I will be demonstrating for you, and the only other one that I have prepared, even though it's not actually completely done, but is presentable, is Lord Jesus Think on Me. So, here's to that one next. All right, so thank you for dropping in for my presentation, and I hope you enjoyed it.